In the days of the Roman Empire, victorious generals were awarded the highest honor by the state, a triumph. This was not ordinarily given. It's a huge honor. The whole city would turn up. The spoils of his victorious war were displayed before all to see. Everybody was cheering and acclaiming his name. But in the midst of all the spectacle, in the midst of probably the highest point in this man's life, there would always be a slave in the chariot whispering in his ear, "Remember that you are mortal. Remember that you are mortal." Recognizing that pride can be dangerous, that there always needs to be someone to remind you of your true place and not to get too high an estimation of yourself. I always thought we all needed somebody like that in our lives, somebody to whisper that. That's pretty much every secretary I've ever had. I remember in particular Nuria. I shouldn't have used her real name. It's too late now. Now it's recorded. She was my assistant when I was Dean of Studies out in California. And by the second day, she kind of pretty much sized me up. She recognized that she was pretty much going to have to run the office. But I gave her the old college try. I said, I'm going to impress this woman if it kills me. I'm going to show that I am something other than an absent-minded professor. I remember one day in particular, we were in my office working on a report, and I got a call from a bishop. He was calling to thank me for a retreat and a study day that I gave for the priests of San Francisco. And I was like, ooh, I'm getting complimented by a bishop, so I put it on speakerphone. So she would have to hear it. And so he was thanking me and asking me if I'd be willing to do something like that again. I said, well, absolutely, Excellency, absolutely. And then he said, we were just so impressed you could talk for 2 hours without notes. That was really, really impressive. So I said, thank you, Excellency. Hung up the phone and looked at her expectantly. I just got a compliment from a successor of the apostle. Surely this is going to do the trick. She just looked at me impassively, without blinking. She said, how come you can lecture for 2 hours without notes, but you can never remember the zip code here? Fair point. I was up here and down there, pretty much where I needed to be. We all need that. We all need someone to remind us of how important humility is. And it's a lesson that has to be learned often. St. Thomas Aquinas teaches us it is a key virtue. Without this, no other virtue is possible. I like what he says about humility. It is the virtue of truth. Without humility, we don't know who we are. Because what does humilitatis mean originally? It means from the earth. And isn't that us? We were taken from the earth. We are dirt, breathed upon by God, endowed with his Spirit, but nevertheless dust. That is the truth of ourselves, and humility is a reminder of that. So what happens when we're not humble? Then we live with a distorted picture. We live a lie. We really don't know ourselves. We don't know others. There's an old saying that pride cometh before the fall. Pride is the fall. Pride is deadly. Pride introduces darkness into our minds, hearts, and souls, and it makes love impossible. I would say it makes happiness impossible as well. I don't know anybody who is happy and arrogant. That somehow we need humility in order to be truly healthy and happy and fulfilled people. But once again, sin always distorts that. Sin leads us to self-promotion, self-elevation, all these sorts of things. So when the fullness of time came, the Son of God took a very humble form. He was not born in a palace. He did not come as a prince. As St. Paul teaches us, he came in the form of a slave. He took on a humble form, a humble stance. And from that vantage point, from that place of humility, he turned the world around. We are literally saved by the humility of God, one who is almighty, all-knowing, all-loving, all-wise, nevertheless became one like us in all things but sin. We believe that humility has a certain kind of a saving power. This is the division between the saved and the damned, quite frankly. Jesus says, learn humility from me. Take on my example. Learn from me. Now, his disciples may not have been the wisest people, always the bravest, but nevertheless they were humble. They recognized that they had something to learn. And as being a teacher for more than 30 years, I can tell you this: you cannot teach an arrogant person. People who are prideful are unteachable. You don't open a book, you don't attend a lecture, you don't listen to a teacher unless you admit, I have something to learn. There is something I don't know. The scribes and Pharisees are unteachable because they believe they have nothing to learn from Jesus. And where do they learn? Nothing. If you think you have nothing to learn, that's what you wind up with. For a prideful person, the world is a closed book. The truth of being will never be open to them, and they will live in darkness. So time and time again, we need lessons in humility. We need to inculcate that value if we are to be saved. Think about it this way. What happens at Mass? We believe in a miracle of transubstantiation. But what becomes transubstantiated? Foie gras, high-end bourbon, bread and wine. Very ordinary, humble things now take on the weight of divinity. And it turns us, ordinary people, also into the body and blood of Christ, his effective sign to the world, a sign of humility, a sign of the humble God who still remains all-loving and all-powerful. I think this applies to us individually, but also collectively. I've been thinking a lot about this over the last few days in readiness of this particular Independence Day. We do have so much to be proud of as a nation. We've been blessed in so many different ways, and that has to be acknowledged. But pride has to be tempered by humility. Why are we the beneficiaries of this republic? Because we're so great? Because we did something remarkable? No, it's because countless men and women went before us and made the ultimate sacrifice, the last full measure of devotion, as Lincoln said. We need to be humble and grateful for that sacrifice, for that service that men and women continue to offer us. Without humility, we take the blessings of liberty for granted, and then they will be lost. And Pope Leo reminds us in his message to America also an important thing. What do these men and women safeguard? Our rights, our liberties. But we didn't make those. Those were gifts from God. Dust though we are, he made us in his own image and likeness. He gave each and every one of us an infinite dignity, value, and importance. I like the saying from the philosopher Voltaire that every man is my master and that I can learn from him. This is how we must approach one another. This is the sign we must be. An attitude of humble gratitude for the blessings of this country, for the blessings of the God who made us, and for the blessings of one another. But this is a lesson only for the humble.